The Grand Chamber of Universal Accord had witnessed countless debates over its 7,000-year history, but never one quite as dismissive as this. Ambassador Thexile of the Varnathi Collective tapped his crystalline appendage against the obsidian podium, the sound echoing through the vast spherical chamber where representatives from 47 species floated, sat, or hovered in their designated zones. The holographic display behind him showed a rotating blue and green world, unremarkable in almost every measurable way. Earth, the humans called it. A backwater planet in an unfashionable arm of the galaxy that had only achieved faster-than-light communication 3 cycles ago. Esteemed members of the Council, Thexiler's translator broadcast his words in 47 languages simultaneously. We have now completed our comprehensive assessment of the species that calls itself humanity. After 6 months of observation, cultural analysis, biological testing, and strategic evaluation, the assessment committee has reached a unanimous conclusion. He paused, his triocular gaze sweeping across the chamber with what could only be described as barely concealed amusement. The humans pose no threat whatsoever to galactic stability, security, or the existing power structures of known space. In fact, they may represent the most harmless spacefaring species we have encountered in the last millennium. A ripple of what passed for laughter among various species echoed through the chamber. The Kraltech delegation, massive beings of living stone who had conquered 17 systems through military might alone, rumbled with particular enthusiasm. Even the typically stoic Manarian hive mind, whose collective consciousness spanned 3 star systems, pulsed with colors that indicated amusement. Only one delegation remained silent. The Viridian Observer, an ancient species that rarely spoke but attended every session, kept their singular representative motionless, the creature's energy field flickering in a pattern that might have been concern, had anyone bothered to read it properly. Counselor Zephix of the Ornathian Federation raised a tentacle in question. Ambassador Thexiler, these are strong assertions. What specific data supports this classification? We have seen the human broadcasts, their entertainment media filled with warfare and conflict. They seem to celebrate violence in ways that even the Kraltech find excessive. The Kraltech delegation rumbled again, this time in agreement. Zephix continued, her bioluminescent patches glowing brighter with emphasis. Should this not concern us? Should we not at least classify them as a potential emerging threat? Thexiler's expression shifted to what humans might recognize as a condescending smile. Counselor Zephix, this is precisely why the committee spent 6 months on this assessment rather than the standard 2. We anticipated these questions. He gestured, and the holographic display changed to show streams of data, biological readouts, and cultural analyses. Let us examine the facts objectively. First, human biology. They are fragile carbon-based life forms with a remarkably short lifespan of merely 100 of their years at maximum, with most dying much earlier. They have no natural armor, no venom, no enhanced regeneration, and no psychic abilities whatsoever. A single Kraltech warrior could physically overpower 50 humans without assistance. Their bones break easily, their skin tears with minimal force, and they require constant intake of specific organic compounds merely to survive. The display shifted to show human military equipment. Second, their technology. While they have achieved basic FTL communication, they have not yet mastered interstellar travel beyond their own solar system. Their weapons are primitive kinetic and chemical-based systems. Their largest warships would be classified as light scouts by our standards, barely capable of atmospheric exit without significant fuel expenditure. The Varnathi Collective has surveillance drones with more firepower than Earth's entire combined military arsenal. More laughter rippled through the chamber. The human vessels on display did indeed look almost comically primitive compared to the crystalline warships of the Varnathi or the bioorganic battlecruisers of the Manarians. Third, Thexiler continued, clearly enjoying his presentation, and perhaps most telling, their psychology and social structure. Humans are catastrophically divided. They have over 200 separate tribal governments on a single planet. They speak thousands of different languages. They wage war against each other over invisible lines they have drawn on maps, over ancient texts they interpret differently, over resources they could easily share. They have never unified even for a moment in their entire history. Our xenopsychology team concluded that humans are constitutionally incapable of large-scale cooperation. They are too individualistic, too emotional, too irrational to ever pose a coordinated threat. Counselor Mix of the Technical Concordat, whose species had achieved post-biological existence and now lived as patterns of organized energy, projected a question into the shared space. What of their reproductive rate? Often, individually weak species compensate through numbers. Thexsiler's amusement grew. An excellent question, Counselor. Humans do reproduce, but slowly. A single offspring per gestation period, occasionally two. Gestation takes 9 months, and offspring remain helpless for years. Their population growth is actually declining on many parts of their world. They are victims of their own success, their comfortable civilization reducing their survival drive. No, the humans will not overwhelm us with numbers. The presentation continued for another hour, each piece of evidence more damning than the last. Humans required a remarkably narrow range of environmental conditions to survive. They were susceptible to thousands of diseases. They spent a third of their lives unconscious in a vulnerable state they called sleep. Their decision-making was compromised by chemical imbalances in their brains that they called emotions. They formed attachments to other organisms that served no practical purpose. They created art and music and literature instead of focusing purely on survival and expansion. By every metric the Council used to assess potential threats, humanity failed to register as anything more than a curiosity. The committee's recommendation, Thexsiler concluded, is that humanity be granted Class 7 status. Limited trade access, cultural exchange programs, basic diplomatic recognition, but no security concerns and no military assessment necessary. In essence, we welcome them to the galactic community as we would welcome any harmless species. Perhaps they will contribute something interesting to our cultural databases, if nothing else. They do seem remarkably creative in their fiction, even if they are thoroughly impractical in reality. The vote was called. 45 delegations voted in favor of the assessment. 1 abstention from the Viridian Observer. Only the Corthan Union delegation voted against, and that was purely procedural, as the Corthans voted against everything as a matter of principle. The decision was logged into the galactic record at 1447 Standard Galactic Time. Humanity was officially classified as harmless. The Council moved on to other business, discussing trade disputes and territorial negotiations and scientific collaborations, already forgetting about the small blue world and its supposedly harmless inhabitants. What the Council did not know, what their 6 months of observation had failed to uncover, was that humanity had been aware of the surveillance from the beginning. A junior technician at the Deep Space Monitoring Station outside Luna had detected the Varnathi observation drones in the first week, their energy signatures slightly out of phase with natural cosmic radiation. The discovery had been immediately classified at the highest levels. For 6 months, humanity had performed an elaborate theater, showing the Watchers exactly what Earth's unified military command wanted them to see. Old equipment was displayed. Actual defensive capabilities were hidden. Military exercises were disguised as cultural festivals. The 47 separate space elevator stations disguised as corporate research facilities continued their work unobserved. The quantum communication network linking every human ship and station operated on a frequency the Varnathi apparently could not detect. Because humans had been studying the galaxy much longer than the galaxy had been studying them. Earth's radio signals had been traveling through space for 2 centuries, and the responses had started arriving decades ago. Humanity had been listening, watching, learning, and preparing. They knew about the Council. They knew about the collective. They knew that 47 species had divided the galaxy among themselves and permitted no competition. They knew that every species that achieved FTL travel was assessed and either assimilated into the existing power structure or eliminated as a potential threat. There was no third option, not really. Class 7 status meant permanent subordination, resources extracted, population controlled, destiny determined by others. Humanity had looked at this system and made a choice. They would not submit. But neither would they reveal their true capabilities until the moment was right. Admiral Sarachan stood in the command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the Gobi Desert, watching the same council session through intercepted feeds. She was a small woman by human standards, barely 5 feet tall, but she carried herself with the presence of someone who had commanded fleets in simulation for 15 years, waiting for this exact moment. Around her, 200 officers monitored displays showing the positions of every council military asset within 10 light-years of Earth. The picture was troubling but not unexpected. The Varnathi Collective maintained a rapid response fleet of 40 warships at a way station just beyond the Kuiper Belt. Insurance, probably, despite their proclaimed confidence in humanity's harmlessness. They voted as predicted, Colonel Marcus Webb said, his voice carefully neutral. He was Chen's tactical officer, a tall man with gray hair and cold blue eyes that had seen humanity's last real war, the brutal conflict over Martian independence 40 years ago. That war had taught humanity hard lessons about space combat, lessons the Council was about to learn themselves. Class 7 status. The Varnathi fleet is maintaining position. No changes to their alert status. They actually believe it, Chen said, almost wondering. They observed us for 6 months and saw exactly what they expected to see. They are so convinced of their superiority, so certain that their metrics and assessments are infallible, that they never question whether we might be deceiving them. She turned to her communications officer. Commander Park, signal status? Commander Janet Park, a young woman whose neural implants allowed her to process quantum communication streams faster than any AI, nodded crisply. All vessels report ready, Admiral. The fleet is in position. Crews have been at silent running for the past week. No detection by Council assets. We remain invisible to their scans. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Invisible was an interesting word. Not cloaked, not hidden by exotic technology humanity did not yet possess, but simply missed. The Council's sensors were designed to detect the energy signatures of their own FTL drives, their own reactor types, their own propulsion systems. Human ships used different principles, engineering solutions developed in isolation, refined in secret. To Council sensors, human stealth ships looked like nothing more than asteroids with slightly unusual mineral compositions. The fleet that surrounded Earth was the result of 70 years of preparation, built in secret across a dozen hidden shipyards scattered throughout the solar system. Not the obvious stations orbiting Earth or Mars, but facilities buried in the ice of Enceladus, carved into the interior of carefully selected asteroids, hidden in the storms of Jupiter. Humanity had learned to build ships that could survive weeks-long voyages with life support, crews trained from birth for the day when they might have to defend their species' freedom against overwhelming odds. The ships were not large, not compared to Council standards, but they were efficient. Every gram of mass served a purpose. Every system had triple redundancy. Every weapon had been tested in simulations a million times. Transmission from the Ark Royal, Admiral, Park announced. Captain Morrison reports his strike group is in optimal position and awaiting your order. Chen nodded. The Ark Royal was humanity's first true warship, a name deliberately chosen to honor centuries of naval tradition. She carried a complement of 300 crew and enough firepower to crack a small moon. She also carried something else, something the Council would not have believed possible from a species classified as harmless. A prototype weapon that exploited a quirk in how Varnathi shields interacted with gravitic waves, a weakness discovered through careful analysis of intercepted technical specifications. All groups report ready, Admiral, Webb confirmed. We have firing solutions on all 40 Varnathi vessels. The quantum comm network is stable. The civilian shelters are at maximum capacity. All non-essential personnel have been evacuated from surface cities to the underground complexes. Chen took a breath. This was it, the moment that would define humanity's future. War or submission, freedom or servitude. The Council had made their assessment, declared humanity harmless, and in doing so, had revealed their fatal flaw. Arrogance. They believed their own superiority so completely that they could not conceive of being wrong. What about the other Council species? Chen asked. Updated intelligence on their fleet positions? Webb pulled up a holographic display showing the local sector. The Kraltek maintain a fortress station at Wolf 359, approximately 8 light-years away. Significant military presence, but our analysis suggests a minimum 4-hour response time to reach Earth, assuming they receive word of hostilities and decide to intervene. The Manarians have biological ships in the Sirius system, 9 light-years out. Similar response time. The Ornathian Federation has commercial vessels in the asteroid belt, but no military assets. The Viridians have an observation post on Titan, but they have never engaged in military action in recorded history. 4 hours, Chen murmured. 4 hours to make our statement and establish a defensive position. She looked around the command center, at the faces of men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Some were afraid, she could see it in their eyes. But most showed determination, the peculiarly human stubbornness that refused to accept the unacceptable. Initiate Operation Prometheus. All units, weapons free. Engage. The orders flashed across the quantum network at speeds the Council's communication systems could not match. Across the solar system, human warships that had been drifting silently for weeks suddenly came to life. The Ark Royal and her strike group, positioned in the shadow of Neptune, activated their FTL disruptors, a field that would prevent any Varnathi ship from escaping to hyperspace. The Victory and her escorts, hiding in the debris field of the shattered comet Shoemaker-Levy, powered up their main batteries. The Defiant, the Indomitable, the Churchill, the Beijing, the Mumbai, dozens of ships bearing names from human history and human languages, all moving in perfect synchronization. The Varnathi fleet, still lounging in their defensive formation beyond the Kuiper Belt, had approximately 90 seconds of warning before the first human kinetic strikes arrived. Their sensors, designed to detect energy weapons and missile launches, barely registered the danger. Why would they? The humans were harmless, the Council had said so. The objects accelerating toward them were just debris, surely, asteroids perhaps perturbed by some natural phenomenon. The Varnathi shield systems, calibrated to stop particle beams and plasma torpedoes, did not even activate. The tungsten penetrators, each one a telephone pole-sized rod of refined metal accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed by magnetic coils, struck the Varnathi ships like the fist of an angry god. Kinetic energy, the most basic principle of physics, mass times velocity squared. The results were catastrophic. Crystalline hulls shattered. Atmosphere vented into space. The flagship of the Varnathi Rapid Response Fleet, a beautiful construct of grown crystal and quantum computing matrices, simply ceased to exist in any recognizable form, transformed into an expanding cloud of debris and frozen atmosphere. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display as human weapons, declared primitive by the Council, tore through shields designed to stop more sophisticated attacks. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. You could deflect energy, absorb it, redirect it. But matter moving at relativistic speeds? That required different strategies the Varnathi did not have because no one had used kinetic weapons in serious warfare for thousands of years. Why would they, when energy weapons were so much more elegant? 16 Varnathi vessels destroyed in the first strike, Webb reported, his voice carrying an undercurrent of fierce satisfaction. The remaining 24 are attempting to return fire. Their beam weapons are ineffective against our armor. Chen nodded. Human ships were armored in layers of ablative materials and ceramic composites, designed to dissipate energy weapons over time. They were also moving, constantly shifting position, making targeting difficult. The Varnathi ships, beautiful and elegant, had not been designed for combat against an enemy that refused to follow conventional tactical doctrine. Second wave, launch, Chen ordered. Missiles this time, fusion-tipped warheads that would have been primitive by Council standards if they had not been deployed in swarms of thousands. The Varnathi point defense systems, optimized for larger, more sophisticated weapons, struggled to track the sheer volume of incoming fire. More crystalline ships shattered. More crew compartments were exposed to vacuum. The Varnathi admiral, Korzelith, a veteran of a dozen minor territorial disputes but nothing like this, sent a desperate hyperspace message to the nearest Council military station, his words shocked and confused. Under attack by human forces. Repeat, humans are hostile. Request immediate assistance. They are not harmless. They are not. His transmission ended as the bridge of his ship was holed by a cluster of human missiles, the vacuum claiming his life before he could finish the thought. Chen felt no satisfaction, no joy in the destruction. This was not a moment for celebration. This was survival, pure and calculated. Status of the Varnathi fleet, she asked. 38 vessels destroyed, Webb reported. 2 damaged and attempting to withdraw. Our interceptors are in pursuit. 2 minutes. The battle had lasted 2 minutes. The Varnathi Collective, one of the most powerful military forces in known space, had lost an entire rapid response fleet in the time it took to brew coffee. Let one escape, Chen ordered. Webb looked at her in surprise, but she continued, we need them to understand what happened here. We need the Council to receive a message, and it needs to come from their own people. Send the coded signal to our interceptors. Disable one ship but allow the other to reach minimum safe FTL distance. As the orders were relayed, Chen turned her attention to the next phase. The opening strike had succeeded beyond projections, but this was just the beginning. The Council controlled thousands of systems, commanded millions of ships, and possessed technologies humanity could barely understand. Earth had achieved surprise, had bloodied the nose of a giant, but now the giant would wake up angry. The holographic displays updated with new information. Hyperspace signatures detected, the fleeing Varnathi ship making the jump to FTL, carrying news of Earth's aggression to Council space. Estimated time for news to reach the nearest major Council military base was 3 hours. Estimated time for a retaliatory fleet to arrive at Earth, perhaps 8 to 12 hours. Humanity had less than half a day before the real war began. Initiate Phase 2, Chen commanded. Deploy the defensive satellites. Activate the solar mirror array. Begin evacuation of all non-essential personnel from Earth orbit. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Across the solar system, humanity revealed more of the preparations they had made in secret. Thousands of defensive satellites, each carrying nuclear-shaped charges designed to create temporary interference fields and hyperspace approach vectors. The massive mirror arrays built into Mercury's orbit, capable of focusing solar energy into coherent beams. The underground cities that could support Earth's population for years if necessary. The backup genetic repositories and cultural archives scattered across 50 different moons and planetoids, ensuring that even if Earth fell, humanity would survive somewhere. In the Grand Chamber of Universal Accord, 7 light-years away, alarms began to sound for the first time in 3 centuries. The holographic display that had shown Earth during the morning session now showed tactical data, the positions of destroyed Varnathi ships, the estimated strength of human forces. Ambassador Thexyler stood before the Council, his crystalline form no longer amused, his triocular gaze fixed on the data with something approaching shock. This is impossible, he said, his translator struggling to convey his emotion. The assessment was thorough. The data was clear. The humans were harmless. Counselor Zephix of the Ornathian Federation, her bioluminescent patches now flickering into stress patterns, projected her voice across the chamber. Clearly, Ambassador, your assessment was fatally flawed. The question now is what do we do about it? The Kraltech delegation rumbled with what might have been approval or might have been anticipation of violence. The Manarian hive mind pulsed with colors indicating calculation and analysis. And in the corner where the Viridian observer maintained their eternal watch, the ancient being's energy field flickered in a pattern that anyone paying attention might have recognized. Not surprise, not shock, but something else. Something that looked almost like satisfaction, as if the Viridians had been waiting for exactly this moment for a very long time. The peaceful galaxy, where power had been stable for a millennium, where the Council determined the fate of all species, where advancement was controlled and conflict was managed, had just been shattered by the species declared most harmless. And in the command center beneath the Gobi Desert, Admiral Sarachan prepared for humanity's next move, knowing that the easy part was over. They had started the war. Now they would have to survive it. The emergency session of the Council convened within 30 minutes of the Varnathi distress signal, a response time that would have been impressive if it were not so clearly inadequate. Ambassador Thexyler found himself in the uncomfortable position of defending an assessment that had gone from unanimous approval to catastrophic failure in the span of a single afternoon. The holographic displays now showed not just the debris field of his collective's destroyed fleet, but something far more disturbing: updated projections of human military capability based on the attack patterns, weapon yields, and tactical coordination they had just demonstrated. 63% casualties, Fleet Commander Rathzek of the Kraltek Dominion growled, his massive stone-like form leaning forward in his suspension field. Your rapid response fleet suffered 63% casualties in less than 3 minutes against a species you declare harmless. This is beyond embarrassing, Thexyler. This is criminally negligent. The Kraltek commander's voice resonated through the chamber like grinding boulders. My analysts have reviewed the tactical data. The humans used kinetic weapons, and your ships were completely unprepared. When was the last time anyone in this chamber even considered defense against mass driver technology? Counselor Mix of the Technical Concordat, their energy pattern now shifting rapidly through analytical configurations, projected their assessment into the shared consciousness space. The issue is not the weapons themselves, but what they represent. Kinetic technology is ancient, yes, but the humans have refined it to extraordinary precision. The tungsten penetrators were launched from distances our sensors could not adequately track, accelerated to velocities that required computational prediction beyond real-time response, and targeted at structural weak points that suggest intimate knowledge of Varnathi ship design. This was not a desperate attack. This was a carefully planned operation executed with near-perfect efficiency. Thexyler's crystalline appendages clicked nervously against the podium. The assessment committee followed standard protocols. We observed their transmissions, analyzed their technology, evaluated their social structures. Every piece of data suggested. They deceived you, Counselor Zephyx interrupted, her bioluminescent patterns now displaying what her species expressed as cold fury. They knew they were being watched and they performed an elaborate deception. The question that should terrify all of us is this: how long have they known about the Council? How long have they been preparing? And what else have they hidden from our observations? The Manarian hive mind representative, a living amalgamation of 1,000 individual organisms speaking with one voice, pulsed with deep purple concern. We have retrieved fragments from the Varnathi flagship's data core. Preliminary analysis suggests the humans possess quantum communication technology operating on frequencies outside our standard monitoring ranges. This explains how they coordinated the attack across such vast distances with perfect timing. It also suggests they may have been intercepting our communications for an unknown period. A cold silence fell over the chamber. If humanity had been listening to Council communications, they would know everything. Fleet positions, military capabilities, political divisions, technological specifications. The implications were staggering. The Corthan Union delegate, who normally voted against everything on principle, actually spoke for the first time in recent memory. How much do they know about us? About our territories, our weaknesses, our internal conflicts? His translator carried the weight of genuine fear. Admiral Chen watched the Council session through the intercepted feed, allowing herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The confusion and recrimination happening in that chamber was exactly what humanity had hoped for. Fear was a weapon, uncertainty was a shield, and right now the council was drowning in both. They are arguing about response protocols, Commander Park reported, her neural implants processing the multilingual debate in real time. The Kraltech want immediate overwhelming retaliation. The Manarians are advocating for a measured response to gather more intelligence. The Varnathi delegation is demanding that someone else take the lead since their fleet just got decimated. The Ornathians are calling for a full investigation into what went wrong with the assessment. How long until they reach consensus? Chen asked. Colonel Webb consulted his tactical projections. Based on historical analysis of council decision-making during crises, somewhere between 4 to 8 hours. They are a bureaucracy, Admiral. They have not fought a real war against a peer opponent in over 1,000 years. They have forgotten how to make rapid strategic decisions under pressure. Chen nodded. That gives us time, but not much. Status of Phase 2 deployments? Webb pulled up the system-wide tactical display. The defensive satellite network is at 78% deployment. The solar mirror array is online and targeting solutions are locked for all probable hyperspace emergence points. The civilian evacuation is 92% complete. All surface military installations have been hardened or relocated underground. The outer system defense platforms are active and crewed. What about the fleet? Chen asked. Captain Morrison reports the strike groups are repositioning according to plan. We have 15 ships holding position near the Kuiper Belt to meet any immediate response. 20 ships are deployed in a defensive sphere around Earth. The remaining vessels are scattered throughout the system in ambush positions. If the Council sends a conventional attack fleet, we will be ready. Chen studied the display, her tactical mind running through scenarios. Humanity had won the first engagement through surprise and preparation, but the mathematics of the situation were brutal. Earth had perhaps 50 warships, built in secret over decades, each one representing an enormous investment of resources and human effort. The Council had thousands, maybe tens of thousands, built by civilizations that had been spacefaring for millennia. In a straight war of attrition, humanity would lose. But Chen had no intention of fighting a straight war. Initiate Phase 3, she ordered. It is time to make our statement. Park's fingers danced across her interface. Opening all channels. Broadcasting on all known Council frequencies. You are live in 3, 2, 1. Chen took a breath and began to speak, knowing her words would reach across light years to every Council world, every species that had dismissed humanity as harmless. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force, broadcasting to the Galactic Council and all member species. 6 hours ago, your Council declared humanity harmless and assigned us Class 7 status, a designation that would have made us permanent subordinates in a galactic order we had no voice in creating. We reject this classification. We reject your authority to determine our destiny. And we reject the assumption that a species must be dangerous to be worthy of respect. The transmission was being received across Council space, displayed on millions of screens, translated into dozens of languages. Chen continued, her voice calm and measured. The Varnathi fleet that was stationed beyond our Kuiper Belt has been neutralized. This was not an act of aggression but a declaration of sovereignty. Humanity will not submit to external control. We will not allow our resources to be exploited, our population to be managed, or our future to be dictated by others. We claim the Sol system and all bodies within it as sovereign human territory. In the Council chamber, the delegates listened in stunned silence. The audacity of the statement was breathtaking. A species that had barely achieved FTL communication was claiming sovereignty, was rejecting Council authority, was treating the established galactic order as if it were negotiable. Ambassador Thexyler felt something he had not experienced in decades. Genuine uncertainty about the future. Chen's transmission continued. We are aware that the Council possesses superior numbers and advanced technologies. We are aware that in a prolonged conflict, humanity faces significant challenges. But we are also aware of something you have forgotten. War is not merely about technology or numbers. It is about will, strategy, and the willingness to pay the price for freedom. Humanity has studied your species, your tactics, your capabilities. We have identified weaknesses you do not know you possess. We have developed strategies you will not anticipate. And we have prepared for this moment for longer than you realize. Fleet Commander Rathzak rumbled with what might have been respect or might have been anger. The human is bold, I will grant that. But bold words do not destroy warships. Counselor Zephix's patterns flickered thoughtfully. No, but bold actions already have. We should listen to what else she has to say. The council has a choice, Chen said, her image now displayed on every screen in the chamber. You can accept humanity as an independent species with full sovereignty over our home system, entitled to diplomatic recognition and mutual defense treaties as equals. Or you can attempt to subjugate us by force. If you choose the latter, understand that we will not fight a conventional war. We will target your supply lines, your communication networks, your civilian infrastructure. We will share our weapons technology with every species that has ever chafed under council control. We will turn your galactic order into chaos that will take centuries to restore. The Manarian hive mind pulsed with alarm. She is threatening total war, asymmetric conflict across the entire council territory. The disruption would be catastrophic even if we ultimately prevailed. Counselor Mix's energy pattern showed rapid calculation. Analysis of human historical conflicts suggests this is not an idle threat. Their species has extensive experience with guerrilla warfare, insurgency, and asymmetric tactics. Applied across galactic distances with their apparent communication advantages, they could indeed create significant disruption. Chen delivered her final statement. We do not seek war with the Council. We seek recognition and respect. We are willing to negotiate, to trade, to share knowledge and culture. But we will do so as equals or not at all. You have 24 hours to respond to these terms. Admiral Chen, out. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in chaos. Unacceptable. Thexiler shouted, his composure finally breaking. They destroyed our fleet and now they make demands? This is madness. We must respond with overwhelming force. But Counselor Zephix raised multiple tentacles for silence. Ambassador, your approach has already led to disaster today. Perhaps we should consider alternatives before committing to a course that could destabilize the entire council. The Viridian observer, silent throughout the crisis, finally moved. The ancient being's energy field expanded, and when it spoke, the voice that emerged carried weight that made even the Kraltech pause. The council has become complacent. We have ruled the galaxy for so long that we forgot other paths were possible. The humans are showing us something we have not seen in a millennium. Innovation born of necessity. Desperation refined into strategy. The fire that builds civilizations rather than the cold calculation that maintains them. Every delegate turned to stare at the Viridian. The ancient species rarely spoke, and never with such directness. The observer continued, I vote to negotiate with the humans. Not from weakness, but from wisdom. A species that can achieve what they achieve today will not be easily defeated. And even if we could destroy them, the cost would be significant. Better to have them as wary allies than determined enemies. The debate raged for hours, but the Viridian's words had shifted the momentum. Slowly, reluctantly, a consensus began to emerge. Not the overwhelming military response some wanted, but a more measured approach. A negotiating team would be sent to Earth. But as insurance, a substantial council fleet would also be assembled at the edge of the Sol system. Show of force combined with diplomatic outreach. The council way of handling unexpected challenges. Admiral Chen watched the debate with careful attention, noting which delegates argued for negotiation and which demanded destruction. Intelligence that would be useful in the days ahead. They are going to negotiate, Commander Park reported. But they are also assembling a fleet. Looks like elements from the Kraltech, Manarian, and Ornathian militaries. Estimated strength around 200 capital ships plus support vessels. Arrival time at Sol system, approximately 18 hours. 200 ships, Colonel Webb muttered. That is more than we can handle in direct combat. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then it is fortunate we have no intention of fighting them in direct combat. Initiate Phase 4. It is time to show the Council why humanity survived every predator on our world despite having no claws, no venom, and no natural armor. We survived because we learned to modify our environment rather than adapt to it. Across the Sol system, human engineering projects that had been decades in the making activated. The asteroid belt, which the Council's assessment had noted as a potential source of raw materials, revealed its true purpose. Hundreds of asteroids were not natural at all, but hollowed-out weapons platforms, their surfaces carefully sculpted to appear unremarkable to casual scans. Each one now powered up, revealing weapon batteries, missile silos, and most importantly, the gravity well generators. The gravity well generators were humanity's answer to the Council's FTL technology. Ships traveling in hyperspace needed to emerge at specific points determined by gravitational fields. The generators created artificial gravity wells, false planets that would pull ships out of hyperspace at locations of humanity's choosing. Locations where human weapons would be waiting. The Council fleet approaching Earth would find the battlefield already prepared, the engagement range predetermined, their tactical options constrained before they even arrived. But the generators served another purpose. They could also create corridors where hyperspace travel was safe, protected routes that only humanity knew. Escape routes if Earth fell, supply lines if the war expanded, strategic depth in 3 dimensions. The Council thought in terms of controlling planets and systems. Humanity had learned to think in terms of controlling the space between. The generators are online and stable, Webb reported. We have established 7 primary emergence points for incoming Council vessels. All are covered by overlapping fields of fire from the asteroid platforms and our mobile fleet elements. We have also created 3 emergency exit corridors unknown to Council navigation databases. Chen studied the tactical setup with satisfaction. And the surprise we prepared for the Crawltech ships specifically? Webb grinned, a rare expression on his usually stoic face. The resonance mines are deployed along all probable approach vectors. If the Crawltech bring their standard battlecruiser formation, they are in for an unpleasant shock. The resonance mines were another uniquely human innovation, weapons designed to exploit specific weaknesses in Council technology. Crawltech ships, with their crystalline stone-like armor, were incredibly resistant to conventional weapons. But they were also susceptible to specific harmonic frequencies that could cause the crystalline structure to vibrate itself apart. Human engineers had spent years analyzing fragments of Crawltech materials obtained through back-channel trades, identifying the precise resonance frequencies that would be most effective. Every Council species had similar weaknesses, vulnerabilities that arose from the very technologies that made them powerful. The Manarian bioorganic ships were resistant to energy weapons but could be compromised by tailored biological agents. The Ornathian vessels relied on quantum computing systems that could be disrupted by electromagnetic pulses of specific wavelengths. Humanity had studied them all, planned for them all, prepared weapons for them all. Status of the diplomatic preparation? Chen asked. Commander Park pulled up a different display. Ambassador Williams and her team are ready. They have reviewed all the intelligence we have on Council negotiation protocols, cultural sensitivities, and likely demands. She is confident we can navigate the diplomatic aspects. Chen nodded. Good. Because the military action is only half of our strategy. We need to divide the Council, make them question their unity. Some species will be more open to compromise than others. The next 12 hours passed in tense preparation. Human crews drilled on their weapons systems, ran through combat scenarios, and prepared for every contingency they could imagine. On Earth, in the underground command centers, analysts pored over every scrap of intercepted Council communication, looking for advantages, weaknesses, opportunities. In the diplomatic section, Ambassador Williams and her multilingual team prepared arguments, counterarguments, and negotiation strategies. And throughout it all, humanity broadcast. Not military transmissions, but culture. Music, art, literature, scientific papers, philosophical treatises. Every human language, every cultural tradition, every achievement of science and creativity. The broadcasts flooded council communication networks, a deluge of human civilization pouring into alien worlds. It was a calculated move. The council had dismissed humanity based on incomplete information. Now they would be overwhelmed with complete information, forced to see humans not as data points on an assessment but as a living, vibrant, complex civilization. The effect was subtle but significant. On council worlds, citizens who had never heard of Earth suddenly had access to human music, human stories, human ideas. The council controlled information carefully, determining what populations should know and when. Humanity's broadcast bypassed those controls entirely, speaking directly to billions of individual beings. Some found human culture disturbing, alien in ways that made them uncomfortable. But others found it fascinating, refreshing in its diversity and emotional depth. On the Ornathian homeworld, a student of xenobiology stumbled across human medical research and was stunned by the sophistication of their understanding of biological systems, despite their supposed primitive status. On a Manarian colony, a member of the hive mind listened to human music and experienced something it had never felt before, the concept of individual artistic expression. On the Kraltek fortress worlds, warriors read human military history and recognized a kindred spirit, a species that understood honor and sacrifice. The cultural broadcast was as much a weapon as the kinetic penetrators, but it worked on a longer time frame. Qin did not expect it to prevent the coming confrontation, but it would sow seeds for the future. Make humanity harder to demonize, harder to dismiss, harder to erase even if Earth fell. The Council fleet emerged from hyperspace exactly 17 hours and 43 minutes after the crisis began, appearing at the edge of the Sol system in a show of overwhelming force. 200 capital ships, each one a masterpiece of advanced technology, each one capable of destroying cities with a single weapons volley. They arranged themselves in a traditional council formation, a demonstration of power and unity. The message was clear: submit or be destroyed. But the fleet did not advance immediately. Instead, a single ship detached from the formation, a diplomatic vessel flying under truce protocols. The Council was offering negotiation before destruction, a courtesy they granted to species they believed could be reasoned with. It was a sign that Chen's gamble had worked. Humanity had made themselves too dangerous to dismiss but had offered an alternative to endless war. The diplomatic vessel was permitted to approach Earth, guided by human navigation signals through the orbital defense grid that now surrounded the planet. Councillor Zephyx herself led the delegation, her presence a sign that the Council was taking this negotiation seriously. She was accompanied by representatives from 5 other species, each one carefully chosen to represent different factions within the Council. Admiral Chen met them not in the command bunker but in the newly constructed diplomatic center in Geneva, a building designed specifically for this moment. The architecture was deliberately human, glass and steel and growing plants, a statement that these negotiations would happen on human terms, in a human space. Ambassador Williams led the human delegation, but Chen was present as a reminder of the military reality underlying the diplomatic pleasantries. Councillor Zephyx spoke first, her translator rendering her bioluminescent communication into English. Admiral Chen, Ambassador Williams, the Council acknowledges the events of the past day. We acknowledge that our assessment of humanity was incomplete. We are prepared to discuss revised terms for Earth's integration into the galactic community. Williams responded with careful diplomacy. Councillor Zephyx, we appreciate the Council's willingness to negotiate. However, we must clarify that we are not discussing integration, but recognition. Humanity seeks sovereignty, not subordination. The negotiations that followed were tense, complex, and often heated. The Council delegates argued that the established order had brought peace and prosperity to the galaxy for millennia. Humanity countered that peace imposed through superior force was not true peace but merely the absence of viable alternatives. The Council pointed out that uncontrolled expansion led to conflict and chaos. Humanity responded that controlled expansion led to stagnation and the suppression of innovation. Hours passed. Arguments were made, countered, refined. Slowly, reluctantly, compromises emerged. Humanity would be recognized as a sovereign species with full control over the Sol system. In exchange, Earth would agree to non-expansion treaties limiting human colonization beyond specific boundaries for a period of 50 years. Trade agreements would be established on terms favorable to humanity, recognizing their technological innovations in exchange for access to Council markets. A mutual defense pact would be offered, but not required, allowing Earth to choose its alliances. Most importantly, humanity would be granted a permanent seat on the Council itself, with full voting rights. Not as a subordinate Class 7 species, but as an equal member. It was an unprecedented concession, one that would change the power dynamics of the entire galactic order. But the alternative, a prolonged conflict with a species that had already proven itself dangerous and unpredictable, was worse. As the final treaty terms were being drafted, Counselor Zephyx spoke privately with Admiral Chen. "You took an enormous risk, Admiral. If any part of your plan had failed, if our response had been faster or more decisive, Earth would have been destroyed." Chen met the alien's gaze steadily. "Counselor, humanity has always lived with enormous risks. We evolved on a planet that tried to eliminate us through ice ages, diseases, predators, and natural disasters. We survived because we learned to take calculated risks, to prepare thoroughly, and to refuse to accept defeat. The Council taught us that submission was our only option. We simply demonstrated that you were wrong." Zephyx's bioluminescent patterns flickered in what might have been respect. "Your species is going to disrupt the galactic order significantly. I am uncertain whether that is a good thing or a catastrophic mistake." Chen smiled. "Counselor, in 50 years, ask us again. I think you will be surprised by the answer." The treaty was signed 3 days later, broadcast across Council space and human networks simultaneously. The species that had been declared harmless had fought their way to the negotiating table and won concessions that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. The galactic order that had been stable for a millennium was now irrevocably changed. In the command center beneath the Gobi Desert, Admiral Chen watched the celebrations happening across Earth and human colonies. Cities that had been evacuated were being repopulated. Families were reuniting. Humanity had gambled everything and won, not a total victory, but something perhaps more valuable, the right to determine their own future. Colonel Webb approached with a final intelligence report. "Admiral, we are receiving messages from 17 different species that are not on the Council. Civilizations that were classified as Class 7 or lower, species that have been subordinated for decades or centuries. They all want to know the same thing: how did we do it?" Chen considered the question carefully. "Tell them the truth, Colonel. We did it by refusing to accept that someone else's assessment of us was accurate. We did it by preparing thoroughly while appearing harmless. We did it by being willing to fight for our freedom even against overwhelming odds. And we did it by remembering that the future belongs not to the species that is strongest, but to the species that is most adaptable." The message was sent, and across the galaxy, subordinated species began to reconsider their own situations. The Council had declared humanity harmless, and hours later humanity had started a war. But more importantly, days later humanity had won a peace. The galactic order would never be the same again, and in the centuries to come, historians would mark this moment as the beginning of the second age of galactic civilization. An age where being declared harmless was no longer a sentence, but merely an underestimation waiting to be corrected. And humanity, the species that had been dismissed as too fragile, too divided, too emotional to matter, had taught the galaxy a lesson it would not soon forget: never confuse caution with weakness, and never assume that silence means submission. Sometimes the most dangerous species is the one you underestimate. Admiral Chen looked up at the stars visible through the command center's observation dome, knowing that humanity's journey was just beginning. They had won their sovereignty, but now came the harder task: proving they deserved it. Building a civilization that could stand as equals among the stars, contributing to the galactic community while maintaining their essential humanity. It would take generations, but then again, humanity had always thought in terms of generations. It was what made them different, what made them dangerous, and ultimately, what would make them great. The Council had declared them harmless. History would remember it as the greatest miscalculation in galactic history. And the beginning of humanity's true story among the stars. The end.